Harry was a food delivery driver, and every day he roamed the city, delivering orders to houses and apartments. Most orders were ordinary, but one day he received a call that turned his life upside down. On his phone, he received an order from a well-known house on Lilac Street. This house was famous in the city for its strange history. It was said that strange things happened there, and locals avoided it. But the order was substantial, and Harry decided that it was just rumors. He took the box with the order and headed to this gloomy neighborhood. The house on Lilac Street looked old and abandoned. Its windows were boarded up, and it seemed like no one had lived in it for many years. Harry approached the door and rang the bell. He heard rustling behind the door and felt like something was watching him. When the door slowly opened, Harry saw a tall man in an old coat, gray hair, and deep wrinkles on his face. The man took the box from Harry and smiled. "Thank you, young man. You delivered the order quickly," he said, sounding somewhat mysterious. "Please, it is my job," Harry replied, trying to ignore the strange appearance of the house and its inhabitant. The man paid for the order and handed the box back to Harry. "And now, allow me to tell you something," he said in a mysterious whisper. Harry took the box and turned to leave, but at that moment, he heard a faint, ghostly voice asking him to open the box. This voice was like a whisper of the wind, touching his soul. He couldn't ignore it. "Please, open the box," the voice whispered. Fear gripped Harry. He looked at the man standing in front of him, and he saw fear in his eyes as well. "What is this voice? What is happening?" Harry asked, his voice trembling. The man took him by the hand and said, "You need to know the truth. Open the box, and you will understand." With difficulty swallowing a lump in his throat, Harry opened the box. Inside, he found a note, crumpled and covered in dust. The note was written in shaky handwriting, and it said, "If you are reading this message, you two are trapped in this house. There is something sinister and invisible here, watching us, and it hungers for our souls. I was the previous delivery driver, and I disappeared without a trace. Find a way to escape before you become part of this mysterious incident." Harry glanced at the man, and his heart raced. The man nodded and said, "I'd have remained here, Harry. We must find a way to escape before it is too late." From that moment on, a nightmare began. The doors and windows of the house were locked, and none of them could find a way out. The voices grew louder, their shadows pursued them throughout the house, and their own fears materialized before their eyes. They realized that the house on Lilac Street was not just strange, something ancient and ominous lurked within its walls. Harry and the man from the note fought for their lives, trying to unravel the mysteries of this place. They found ancient books and documents that spoke of dark rituals and sacrifices performed in this house in ancient times. They understood that only by performing certain rituals could they free themselves from the horror that held them captive. But time was running out, and the malevolent entity of the house became increasingly aggressive. They heard its voice, it addressed them by name, and their own fears began to materialize before their eyes. They felt that their time was running out. With each passing day, the struggle became more desperate. They spent nights trying to perform the ancient rituals, but despite their efforts, the house seemed to engulf them more deeply. Every door they tried to open led them to a new nightmare, and every window was sealed. They realized that they needed to unravel the final mysterious ritual, which, according to rumors, could free the house from the malevolent entity. However, they didn't know how to perform it, and they had only a few hours left before becoming part of this dark incident forever. On the last night, when the moon was as red as blood, Harry and the men gathered in the room that seemed to be the epicenter of evil. They read the ancient text and began to perform the ritual, intertwining their last hopes into it. With each passing minute, they felt the darkness receding, the invisible entity began to depart, and the walls of the house trembled. Their voices merged, and together they completed the ritual. The house on Lilac Street began to crumble into dust, and the malevolent entity departed, disappearing forever from that place. Harry and the man escaped from the ruins and were finally freed from the nightmare that had haunted them for so long.
They would never forget that horrific experience and the lesson it taught them. They realized that not every job was worth it. Sometimes, even the most ordinary places could hide darkness and secrets better left undisturbed.
It was a chilly autumn evening when Jake, a young pizza delivery guy, found himself heading into the older, more rundown part of town. He had received an order with an unclear address, but the promise of a generous tip was enough to get him to venture into the unfamiliar territory. The sun had already set, casting long shadows over the quiet streets as he navigated his way through dimly lit alleys and crumbling buildings. The address he had been given led him to a desolate area where the buildings appeared to be frozen in time, remnants of a forgotten era. As he pulled up to the indicated location, Jake's excitement for a potential windfall of cash began to wane. Before him stood a dilapidated structure that looked as if it had been abandoned for years. Broken windows, peeling paint, and an eerie silence filled the air. A sense of unease crept over Jake, but he reasoned that the order might have come from one of the few remaining occupants in the neighborhood. He grabbed the pizza box, made sure his phone was on him, and approached the decaying building. The door creaked open as he pushed it, revealing a dark interior that seemed to swallow the feeble light from his flashlight. Navigating the debris-strewn hallway, he tried to ignore the whispers of doubt echoing in his mind. Just drop off the pizza and get out of here, he told himself. He climbed a rickety staircase, each step eliciting an unsettling creak. On the landing, he found a door with a partially visible number that matched the order. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door and waited, heart pounding in his chest. Seconds turned into minutes, and there was no response. Jake's patience waned, and he was about to turn and leave when he heard a faint noise from within the apartment. The door slowly swung open, revealing darkness shrouded in shadows. A shiver ran down Jake's spine, but he forced himself to call out, "Pizza delivery." As if in response, a pale hand emerged from the darkness, reaching out to grab the pizza box. Jake couldn't make out the person's face in the dim light, but he caught a glimpse of long, disheveled hair. Without a word, the hand retracted, pulling the door closed with an eerie finality. Relieved to have completed his delivery, Jake turned to leave, only to find his heart sinking when he realized his phone was nowhere to be found. Panic started to rise within him, and he retraced his steps, desperately searching for the phone's faint glow. The building seemed to have grown darker, and the walls appeared to press in on him as if they were closing in. Finally, he spotted his phone lying on the floor near the bottom of the staircase. He rushed toward it, heart racing, when suddenly the phone began to ring. The loud, piercing sound cut through the silence like a knife, making Jake jump. The caller had displayed an unknown number, and with trembling hands, he answered the call. "Hello." Jake's voice trembled as he spoke into the receiver. A soft, almost whisper-like voice on the other end sent shivers down his spine. "I am watching you," the voice said, each word laced with an unnatural calmness that sent chills down Jake's spine. "Who is this? Where are you?" Jake stammered, his fear evident in his voice. "I am right here, in the building. I've been watching you since you entered," the voice continued, chillingly calm. Jake's heart pounded against his chest as his eyes darted around the dimly lit corridor. He couldn't see anyone, but a feeling of being watched seemed to close in around him. Fear turned to desperation, and he turned and sprinted toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the decaying building. The world around him seemed to blur as he ran, his breaths ragged and frantic. His mind raced, conjuring images of the voice's owner lurking just out of sight. As he neared the door, a cold gust of wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing his flashlight and plunging him into darkness. His hand fumbled for the doorknob, and with a surge of relief, he burst out into the night. Gasping for air, he stumbled onto the sidewalk and looked back at the building, his heart pounding in his ears. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure watching him from one of the broken windows, but when he blinked, it was gone. Still trembling, Jake reached for his phone, intending to call for help, but as he unlocked the screen, he saw a message that sent a wave of dread crashing over him. It read, "I am closer than you think." His hands shook as he tried to dial 911, but the phone suddenly went dead, leaving him alone in the dark, isolated from the world. Panic surged within him, and he turned to run down the desolate street, desperate to escape the unseen presence that haunted him. In his haste, Jake didn't notice the uneven pavement ahead of him. He tripped and fell, pain shooting through his ankle as he crashed to the ground. As he lay there, breathless and terrified, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching from behind. He turned his head, heart pounding, to see a figure emerge from the shadows, its features obscured by darkness. The last thing Jake saw was a pair of cold, lifeless eyes before everything went black. Weeks later, the police would discover his lifeless body in that forsaken part of town, a chilling reminder of a nightmarish encounter that would haunt their own dreams. The unanswered questions, the lingering sense of dread that would remain, etched into the memory of anyone who dared to set foot in the forgotten address. The night was dark and stormy as John, a pizza delivery driver, navigated his way through the winding roads of the remote countryside. The rain pounded on his car's windshield, making it difficult to see. He glanced at the address on the order slip, 1314 Willow Lane. This was definitely one of the more remote locations he had delivered to. As John approached Willow Lane, he noticed that the trees seemed to loom ominously over the road, their branches forming a tunnel that led him deeper into the dense forest. The GPS on his phone kept recalculating the route, struggling to find a stable signal in this desolate area. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, John arrived at the address. The house was a dilapidated, two-story structure that appeared as though it had been abandoned for years. The porch creaked ominously as John climbed the steps and rang the doorbell. A few moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, thin man in his 50s with a pale complexion and piercing blue eyes. He wore a suit that seemed out of place in this remote setting. "Good evening," the man said with a polite smile. "I've been expecting you. Please, come in." John hesitated for a moment, feeling a shiver run down his spine, but he pushed the uneasy feeling aside. He was used to encountering strange characters during his deliveries, and this man didn't seem threatening. The man led John into a dimly lit living room. The flickering candles on the coffee table cast eerie shadows on the walls. John noticed that there were no signs of life in the house, no voices, no laughter, nothing. "Please, have a seat," the man gestured toward an old, worn-out sofa. John obliged, sitting down as the man disappeared into the depths of the house. He couldn't help but notice the peculiar decor of the room. The walls were adorned with strange symbols and unusual paintings. The air was heavy with a musty, almost metallic scent that made John's stomach churn. The man returned with a tray holding empty glasses and a bottle of wine. "I apologize for the mess," he said, pouring the wine with a shaky hand. "I wasn't expecting guests, you see, but my friends will be here soon." John nodded, trying to appear calm, but his heart was racing. He had a feeling that something was terribly wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He decided to play along for now. As they sat in silence, John's unease grew. He could hear faint, muffled noises coming from deeper within the house, strange, unsettling sounds that sent a chill down his spine. Just as he was about to ask the man about the noises, the front door swung open, and 3 more people entered the room. They all wore similar formal attire and had the same eerie, pale complexion as the man who had answered the door. "Welcome, my friends," the man said, standing to greet them. "Our pizza has arrived." John's heart sank as he realized that there was something terribly wrong with this gathering. The newcomers stared at him with unblinking eyes, their expressions devoid of emotion. One of them, a woman, extended a bony hand towards John. "I am glad you could join us," she said in a hollow voice. John shook her hand, his fear growing with each passing moment. I just came to deliver the pizza," he stammered. The man who had answered the door chuckled, a chilling sound that sent shivers down John's spine. "Oh, you misunderstand, my dear delivery boy. You Ray not just here to deliver pizza. You Ray here to join us." Before John could react, the 4 strangers closed in on him, their faces contorted in sinister smiles. He tried to scream, but a cloth was quickly placed over his mouth, and he felt his consciousness slipping away. When John finally awoke, he found himself bound to a chair in a dimly lit room. The same eerie symbols adorned the walls, and the metallic scent hung heavy in the air. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized the gravity of his situation. The man who had answered the door stood before him, holding a knife. "Welcome to our little gathering," he said with a wicked grin. "You see, we have a tradition here. We offer a sacrifice to ensure our continued prosperity. John S. mind raced as he struggled against his restraints. He had stumbled into something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. The terrible truth dawned on him: he was the sacrifice. As the men approached with the knife, John S. desperate screams filled the room, but they were quickly drowned out by the eerie chants of the others. The last thing John saw before darkness consumed him was the glint of the blade. The next morning, John S. car was found abandoned on Willow Lane, the engine still running. The pizza delivery boy had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a trail of unanswered questions and a sense of dread that lingered over the remote house in the woods, where the mysterious client and his friends continued their ominous gatherings, ensuring their dark secrets remained hidden from the world.